Deathwalker brings back most everybody who was absent last time in And the Sky Full of Stars. So we kick off with Talia having a run-in with Kosh. She handles it well, considering he's an enigmatic representative of a species more powerful than everyone else put together, and likes to dress in a sequin muumuu. He wants to hire her services for a business transaction, and is cagey on the details. But he has arranged everything ahead of time, so he figures show up is all that she needs to know right now. Then he's off to do whatever Vorlons do, presumably persuade penguins to learn to fly. Also attempting a rendezvous is Natoth, who is waiting for the Callisto. Ship, not the moon, obviously. The mountain may go to Muhammad, but even a moon would be difficult to persuade to make the trip. While hanging around waiting for the arrival, she spots a woman in Minbari clothes who, when she has to remove her hood to pass through security, reveals she isn't Minbari. Natoth calls her Deathwalker, and then proceeds, quite naturally, to walk over and beat the living shit out of her. Security eventually, when they have a few free moments, get around to actually providing some security and stop Natoth from beating someone to death. After the titles, Garibaldi fills Sinclair in on what happened.
Totally berserk when we hauled her in. Kept yelling, Deathwalker.
Deathwalker?
I thought you might remember that name. I know I do.
Right, it's a Chuck Norris movie, right? No, it's the war criminal. Oh yeah, I always mix those two up. They try questioning Natoth, and finally she explains that her family took a blood oath to kill this woman. It all goes back to the Dilgar War, which all started nearly 30 years earlier as an alien race called the Dilgar launched an attack on the members of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds. The Narn weren't involved because they were being dominated by the Centauri at this time. The Centauri secretly traded with the Dilgar to help maintain their Narn stronghold, so they weren't in on it. And the Minbari weren't in there because they were too busy not giving a shit. Earth, relatively new on the galactic scene compared to everybody else, threw their support behind the League. Because they were considered the ass end of space, humanity had been largely ignored as they expanded their territory. So when they went to war, the Dilgar were unprepared for how tough this new adversary would be. And eventually, with humanity in the game, the Dilgar were pushed back and forced to stay in their own system permanently. The whole thing earned Earth major clout with the other alien races, and the Dilgar were remembered as monsters. Particularly was one of them who used captured beings for experimentation. And not just a Mengele level of twisted fuck. This was someone operating on a level of depraved that's unmatched. Imagine if SimCity had a inflict insane horrors on the populace option, and some disturbed child hit that button every single turn. Well, she was even worse than that, thus earning her the nickname of Deathwalker. Natoth's grandfather was a victim, thus the Oath of Vengeance, even though Sinclair points out that there's no way this woman could be that old. Even if she slept in a tub of moisturizer each night, she's not going to look 30 years younger. G'Kar shows up to apologize on Natoth's behalf, and given this rare act of diplomacy, Sinclair is willing to meet him halfway and lock Natoth up in G'Kar's quarters. And I think we can all agree that having to listen to him go at it with 3 prostitutes at the same time is punishment enough for anybody. But we've also got to worry about Talia here.
Ambassador Kosh, all the clearances seem to be in order and the pay is very generous. However, there's something I still don't understand.
Understanding is a 3-edged sword.
What does that even mean? Meaning is marbled like bacon, but its smell is more deceptive. Never mind. Kosh's contact shows up, wearing an outfit that you'd normally see if a pimp was also a game show host. His name is Abbott, and he talks as if he's in a New Jersey deli and is trying to impress his date. Talia goes to scan his mind, but senses nothing there, which satisfies Kosh, so they can begin the negotiations, presumably to get Abbott a better hat. While that's going on, we head to Med Lab, where the alleged Dilgar woman is being checked over.
Her vital signs have stabilized, but I still can't match her species type.
Well, I'm not surprised. You are clearly a stuntman. I'm amazed they even gave you a line. Sinclair comes by to let Dr. Franklin know she's a Dilgar, hard as that is to imagine. Seems the Dilgar's son went Nova, and because their race was confined to the one system, they were wiped out. I can't help but wonder if that was somehow arranged. There's some fairly powerful species out there, and a good chance there would have been warning to allow an evacuation. Their species may be monsters, but they're not xenomorphs where there's no option but to exterminate every last one of them. I suppose it's also possible that this happened during the Earth-Minbari War, where no effort could be expended in helping the Dilgar by Earth, and the Dilgar's former victims so bitter over what happened that it was considered a fitting punishment for them. So, how their most famous war criminal could be on this station and looking barely older than her file photo is a mystery, along with the vials in her luggage. We have a clue as G'Kar discusses things in private with Na'Toth. He understands her problem, but it's made one for him. That ship she was waiting for had an ambassador on board who was to negotiate with Jadur. That's the name of the woman Na'Toth beat with a wrench. She has to be delivered to the Narn homeworld alive, blood oath or no, or it will screw up their plans. And I was avenging someone who died 3 decades ago isn't going to make their bosses happy. On a similar topic, Sinclair gets a call from Senator Grumpy Pants, who insists that whatever Sinclair might think, they want Jadur. If this is her, she is to be sent to Earth as soon as she can travel. They must know about whatever it is that the Narn were interested in.
Commander, is it true?
Is what true?
They say you have Deathwalker.
Can I see? I love Chuck Norris in that. Sinclair's on his way to see Jadur. She woke up and wants to talk.
Do you know about the wind swords?
They have sheltered me for many years, in return for certain services. They speak of you often, Sinclair. They say you have a hole in your mind.
Yeah, I get that a lot. The thing everyone is after is a serum for immortality. The reason she looks so young, well, doesn't look too old anyway. Sinclair wonders about this, though, and goes to see Lanier. Delenn was here last week, so she's on vacation. He needs some input on things from the Minbari point of view, especially the relationship to that group of Minbari that was sheltering her.
Are you familiar with the name Deathwalker?
Quite.
I've got all of Chuck Norris's movies. Sinclair brings up the wind swords, and Lanier confirms, yeah, those guys are way out there. Woo! They are some cranks. But even they wouldn't shelter a nut like her. She's the extremist that makes the extremists nervous. Case in point, G'Kar stops by to persuade her to work with the Narn. But even with an incredibly generous offer, she still wants the severed head of Na'Toth. G'Kar leaves with a look of, this lady's fucked up even by my standards. It's certainly something to be considered by the senior staff. Garibaldi is the most aghast at sending her to Earth, but Franklin says if they want the serum, they need her to help them understand it. It's a package deal. In private, Garibaldi wants to know what Sinclair is thinking, going along with the orders from Earth Central on this. But Sinclair says that it's too big of an issue for them to decide themselves. And if this serum works, it'll save more people than she killed. And if there's one thing we all hate, it's the deficit. Sinclair goes to see Jadur and asks why she'd be willing to give this serum to the very people who conquered hers. So she says that it's to make a memorial for her people now that they are gone, to force everyone else to acknowledge them as their saviors, no matter how much they'd like to curse the Dilgar. This is, of course, a classical ethical question thanks to the Nazis. Everyone who says thanks to the Nazis is usually saying something not to be thankful for. But that question that it raises is the knowledge gained from doing evil so tainted that it should be discarded, even if that knowledge could save lives? Of course, one of the things that makes the Nazi situation easier to reject is that the most notorious experiments weren't even real science, so much as satisfying the curiosity of a twisted mind. But also that those experiments that were conducted in a rigorous scientific manner were used on malnourished and weak prisoners. The hypothermia experiments, for example, which were considered the most useful of the data, were still testing a resistance to cold on people who had burned away most or all of their insulating fat from starvation. In other words, the data using abused prisoners is really only accurate if you're trying to treat abused prisoners. Like our Cardassian doctor over on Voyager, Jadur's situation is made more difficult because the data has actual, useful results in this case, capable of saving lives. And so we're left with another possible thought experiment to try to think our way through this. Say a child has a rare blood type who's in need of a transplant, and someone murders a child with that blood type so that the organs would be available. Would it be unethical for the doctor to use the organs to save the patient? Does the fact good will come from it justify using the fruits of such an evil act? Earth seems to think yes, which is why Sinclair is grudgingly going to follow orders, unaware that G'Kar has leaked J'dur's presence to the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, and they have a rather large welcoming party. Ambassador Kalika Ambassador Finhead seems to be the spokesperson for the group and wants to discuss a trial, but Sinclair says that he has orders to send her back to Earth.
Will have to kill us all first.
Well, luckily we brought someone along with a lot of experience with that job. He agrees to have a hearing. It's going to be rough, but Sinclair is optimistic. Kosh is sitting this out. He's too busy messing with Talia's head right now to deal with a genocide. But with the Minbari on his side, the League will then get the deciding vote, and J'dur will then get the trial that she deserves. That's what Finhead asks for on behalf of the League, so the four powers now have to take a vote. The Centauri are up first, and because of their collusion with the Dilgar that allowed all of this to happen, they'd rather avoid the messiness of a trial, so Londo has the unenviable task of saying, "Yes, this is terrible, really, really terrible. But it didn't happen to me, so I see no need for a trial." G'Kar loses no opportunity to insult Londo in front of everybody, and to pretend that he has the moral high ground. Votes to have a trial on the condition that it be held on Narn rather than on Babylon 5. This is clearly his Hail Mary pass. J'dur wasn't going to be working with them, so this is his last chance to get her onto the homeworld. The League don't believe they can get a fair trial there, so G'Kar says no then. As he presents it, they're the only ones neutral, so the only ones who can be fair. And the fact that he can say that without laughing proves how skilled of a diplomat he is. Sinclair, of course, votes yes. That just leaves Lanier, sitting in for Delenn. Well, much to the shock of everybody, he essentially repeats what Londo said. They weren't involved, so they should have no say. Therefore, they vote no also. The measure is thus defeated, and the League is incensed. This could be the beginning of the end for Babylon 5 here. In private, Lanier reveals the truth to Sinclair. During the war, the Wind Swords came to the Council with powerful weapons to use against humanity. Weapons created by J'dur. As much as they might feel guilty about what happened, they can't bring themselves to admit that they profited from a war criminal. Their pride just won't allow it. But there's a price for that pride, as a whole bunch of warships from different League worlds show up to demand J'dur, and it's only the fact that only one of them can actually take her that stops the violence from breaking out. That would be ironic, wouldn't it? People so angry over the last war they're prepared to start a new one with their own allies. It's like rain on your wedding day. While that is being arranged, Talia is trying to convince Kosh to let her out of this contract. All that happens is he and Abbott babble nonsense at one another while she scans Abbott's empty head.
Herring is just a herring, but a good cigar is a Cuban.
A stroke of the brush does not guarantee art from the bristles.
It's like a rap battle involving two fortune cookies. The situation is already dull for Talia, but when it last ended, she had an uncomfortable vision, and it comes back when Abbott returns. And not just because he smells of Limburger and a quart of Old Spice. Finally, the vision is complete, and it's of her being attacked by a killer whose mind that she had gone into, as mentioned in The Quality of Mercy. Apparently, that was what the other two was waiting to happen.
Kosh, old boy, a pleasure as always.
You'd think a guy like that would go around with more than just a felt hat to protect his brain. You know, if the zombies show up, he is screwed. Shockingly, Kosh is evasive on why he did all this. He just carries it off with a few words, but at this point, I think even regular language sounds like gibberish to Talia. In private, Sinclair is having a second sit-down with the League leadership to discuss the serum, suggesting that the League could send scientists to assist her on Earth, and then she can be tried once the serum is complete. I can't breathe in this mask. I'm just an extra. They seem amenable, but worry that this might get sabotaged. But Sinclair says that no one else gets a say in a private deal between Earth and the League. But J'dur doesn't give a crap about a deal. She refuses to believe that Earth is going to honor any idea of a trial, and even if they did, her revenge is that the only way to make this serum is to take life from someone else. The only way to do that is to become as bloodthirsty as the Dilgar. Will it work with an animal? What? I'm just thinking, if the serum works on everybody, then biology shouldn't matter, so it'd work with an animal, right? No. I think you're lying, but even if that were true, couldn't we just create mindless clones and use... Damn it! You are ruining my evil serum with stuff that's not evil! It doesn't matter anyway, because in the end, the Vorlons show up and destroy Jadur's ship. She's the only one on board, so she's the only one killed. Kosh says that humanity is not ready for immortality. And I guess immortality didn't do Jadur much good since she died anyway. So we'll need a better serum next time. Deathwalker gets a stamp of recommended. Its importance is minimal, but it's an enjoyable and engaging outing, moving quickly and providing a nice insight into the political complexities of their situation. Whatever DS9 versus B5 comparisons you want to make, this is a dimension that B5 is particularly suited to explore, with a government back home that's not always moral, and complex personal and government agendas that are all jockeying for position. Deathwalker demonstrates how interesting that can really be in a science fiction show.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
The willows must scuttle carefully.
Does Saturn have rings?